jalapeno. This is part 2 of my Gargoyles retrospective. I covered most of the groundwork for the series in part 1, so if you haven't seen it yet, or if it's been a while, I'd recommend checking out that video first, right here. For the rest of us, let's quickly get up to speed. Gargoyles is a 1994 animated television series from Disney about a small clan of creatures called Gargoyles who were put under a sleeping spell back in medieval Scotland and have awakened in present-day New York City, now devoting themselves to protect the city and its citizens. Most of the first season served as a setup to this premise, with Season 2 really taking the reins from there and diving headfirst into all the myriad of possibilities to be had with this world and its characters. The first thing that I guess needs to be mentioned about Gargoyles' second season is that it's long. Very long, in fact, comprising 2/3 of the show's total length. Also, from what I can tell, the increased length was basically sprung on the showrunners by Disney, who seemed to be looking for a mega hit on TV in the same vein as the successful theatrical films they'd been producing throughout the last few years.
We were still finishing up the post-production on Season 1 when they said, how many episodes can you do for Season 2? And I said, we did 13 the first season, so we can do 13. And they said, how about 52? And I said, how about a nervous breakdown?
Jalapeno! The writing in Gargoyles Season 2 is top-notch, where you could already tell in the first season that the show was perhaps aiming a little bit higher than the age of its target audience. Season 2 feels more to me like a full-blown show for teens and young adults that's trapped in the body of a Saturday morning cartoon.
I learned that from the television.
Not that this stopped the creators from sneaking in some frightening or violent imagery at times. Meanwhile, Gargoyles' themes and characters, especially the villains, are written with a truly impressive level of complexity that totally went over my head when I was a kid. Gargoyles is a show that has no problem whatsoever devoting a 4-part episode to developing the tragic rise and fall of a couple of secondary villain characters, and it's some of the best material in the series. The story of Gargoyles' second season is split up into 4 main sections, each concluding with one of these big multi-part episodes that changes the status quo and segues into the next part of the story.
And so it begins. Gargoyles Chapter 2. Or is it 3? I've lost count.
As a result of the show's newfound length, there are definitely some pacing issues in Gargoyles Season 2. Obviously, you've got to spread out all of the big event episodes, so there's a bunch of other stuff in between. At times, it feels like the plot is just kind of spinning its wheels because, well, it is. It's a slow burn, but ultimately I wouldn't have it any other way. The increased episode count serves to facilitate a ton of terrific character growth in its cast, even many supporting players who only had bit parts in the first season. It also allows for a lot more wacky and unique ideas to get thrown at the wall, which probably wouldn't have made the cut otherwise.
It worked.
The longest section, which makes up almost half the season, consists of a stretch of episodes where Goliath, Bronx, Elisa, and a new character, Goliath's daughter Angela, are separated from the rest of their Gargoyle clan in Manhattan. They're sent to various locations around the world on a magical skiff and help out the locals in each place they visit deal with some problem or another, all the while hoping their next stop will return them home to New York City.
I'm beginning to think this Manhattan we search for is a myth.
This part of the story, referred to as the World Tour, is the most famous and fondly remembered arc from the series. It greatly expands the scope of Gargoyles, which up until that point had mostly been localized in New York, barring the occasional flashback to medieval Scotland.
I think if we kept them in New York, there was the danger of falling into a kind of a formula. And by taking them out of that and sending them on this big trip, it opened us up to all kinds of new stories.
A clan in the middle of a rainforest? Is that possible?
Long ago, there were clans all over the world, but I was not aware any of them survived.
Throughout the World Tour, we meet different clans of gargoyles and other types of supernatural beings from all over the map, as well as a whole host of mythical figures, many of whom return for future episodes that expand their stories further. The world of Gargoyles has no problem whatsoever oscillating between and mashing up what would otherwise be incompatible genres. We've got monsters and mutants, myths and magic, even aliens, and so much time travel, including several instances of villains who go back in time to give their younger selves the tools they need to become more powerful in the present, like Biff in Back to the Future 2.
Just get in the car, butthead.
Or you call it butthead, butthead.
That's some story, all right. You threw in everything but King Arthur and the Holy Grail.
Yes, well, we haven't encountered the Holy Grail yet.
There are even several explicit literary references to things like King Arthur and Avalon, and even the works of William Shakespeare.
Alas, poor Goliath. I knew him well.
Gargoyles was so Shakespearean in nature that it just seemed natural to begin including Shakespeare characters.
I see.
Two of his plays in particular, Macbeth and A Midsummer Night's Dream, are extensively referenced. By the end of this season, the world of Gargoyles feels every bit as massive, mysterious, and expansive as either one of the comic book adapted TV continuities by DC and Marvel that this show was designed to compete with. This is even more impressive considering those franchises both had the benefit of being able to draw upon decades worth of pre-established and well-regarded stories and characters from their respective source materials, whereas Gargoyles writers had to come up with most of their own ideas from scratch. There's a sense that any character or plot element from any previous episode could be brought back at any time to be given more development or backstory that rewards repeat viewings.
Who are you?
Why, it's me, Thom. I was but a lad at Castle Wyvern, the night that the Vikings destroyed your clan.
What other TV show are you going to be able to see King Arthur, Macbeth, and a time-traveling bird monster team up to fight against a giant stone dragon in the Brooklyn Maze?
Merlin, where are you when I need you?
Wait just a sec, though. If this is Gargoyles' version of King Arthur, and Gargoyles is a Disney property...
Always did fancy a trip to Disneyland.
And if all Disney properties are linked, then does that mean that this guy and this guy are the same person? No, stop. We don't have time for that. This thing is like 52 episodes long, and we got a lot of ground to cover. Let's keep it moving, folks. But that's just a theory. A Gargoyles theory. Anywho, if you'll recall, Gargoyles' first season touched upon themes of prejudice, revenge, and hatred. Well, Season 2 explores them even further, predominantly through the character of Demona. This is, however, a recurring theme throughout the entire story, and comes up several times with different sorts of situations and characters, both in Manhattan as well as abroad.
I believe that humans are dangerous. My ancestor, the Minotaur, was locked in a labyrinth by humans, starved, and then killed by a human hero.
It's even played for laughs at one point, with this comic relief security guard dude who keeps getting screwed over by happenstance related to the Gargoyles, and he ineptly goes after Goliath, who he blames for his rotten luck.
That big gargoyle thought he could get away from me.
Characters who pass the series' invisible morality test are typically those who are able to move beyond their preconceived notions or grudges against other people.
You are definitely not like the humans of legend.
I'll choose to take that as a compliment.
Whereas those who can't or won't let go always end up the worse for wear because of it.
Your thirst for vengeance has only created more sorrow.
I appreciate the fact that even though most of the series' characters are monstrous, larger-than-life creatures, they're consistently portrayed as being very human at their core. You know, to tell you the truth, I actually struggled for a while with who exactly it was that this central cast reminded me of far more than any of the other standard sorts of action hero cartoon teams.
Sounds like you've been watching too many cartoons.
And as if I hadn't made ample enough comparisons last time, I find myself once again referring back to Star Trek.
Jalapeno.
Yes, the main team of Gargoyles reminds me of nothing so much as the main crew from Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation. Appropriate, since once again, a great number of actors from Trek are featured in some capacity on Gargoyles.
Why did you just disappear? We've been out of our minds with worry.
He came to me, storyteller. He believed in the legends and hunted until he found me.
It's all very well for you to make fun. What have you done lately that's useful?
The hardships of the Galactic War taught me long ago that trust is a rare and precious commodity.
Goliath, in particular, gives me very strong Captain Picard vibes. He's a similar sort of wise, stoic father figure to the Gargoyle clan, who always seems to know the right thing to do, acting not only as the team's leader, but also as their voice of reason, and he's prone to giving the same sorts of speeches that Picard or Kirk would often give on their series.
Only living beings possess the ability to change and make new choices. Ultimately, Vogel chose honor.
Despite Goliath being Gargoyle's moral authority figure, the show never shies away from presenting him with dilemmas of his own. His major character development this season mostly stems from his relationship with his newfound daughter, Angela. Angela was one of the eggs from the Gargoyle Rookery mentioned briefly in the series' pilot episode. She, along with several of her brothers and sisters, were raised on the mystical island of Avalon from Arthurian legend, where time works differently, and they've all been living alongside the former residents of Castle Wyvern for 1,000 years.
Are you Goliath? I've heard so much about you. This is like a dream come true.
Having been raised by these humans, Angela isn't used to the traditional gargoyle familial structure in which an individual's specific parents are irrelevant, and she craves a personal relationship with her biological parents, Goliath and Demona.
Isn't it magnificent, Father?
Angela, I've told you before, you and your rookery brothers and sisters must look on the whole clan as your parents. That is the gargoyle way.
Goliath is not only resistant to this idea, but has a propensity to treat Angela as more of a child than she is, having only first met her as a young adult. His first impulse is essentially to coddle her, not being 100% forthcoming on the details of their relationship to Demona, and often attempting to limit Angela's contact with her to protect her from the truth.
You never told me that you and Demona were once in love.
It was a very long time ago. It doesn't matter anymore.
It matters to me.
Season 2 also expands on Goliath's relationship with the Gargoyles' main human ally, Elisa Maza, taking it in interesting directions. Jalapeno! That's right, what we have here is one of the few interspecies romances I can ever remember seeing on a show intended for children.
Just ignore him.
Elisa is certainly a little perturbed at the prospect of falling for an 8-foot-tall bat creature.
There's someone I care for deeply, but it would be impossible to get involved with him.
She makes every attempt to keep those feelings in check right up until the final moments of the season.
Give it to me, Goliath.
Don't make a joke, don't make a joke, don't make a joke, don't make a...
Put it in my hand.
Nani? I guess it's really not that strange, though? Maybe? I mean, while we're making Star Trek comparisons, you've got all sorts of relationships on that show between humans and aliens. Hell, they're even genetically compatible enough to have kids a lot of the time.
You want to nail the guy.
In one episode, we do the whole monstrous creature goes out in public on Halloween, and nobody seems to bat an eye at the fact that they're obviously not wearing a costume thing.
Check it out, a costume over a costume.
I've wanted to stroll down a city street with you for a long time.
The episode also pays homage to Disney's own Beauty and the Beast, with Elisa dressing up as Belle. The romance is definitely a little strange, but it's fine if for no other reason than seeing Goliath's reaction when Elisa is turned into a gargoyle.
I never realized when you were human how beautiful you are.
You mean you thought I was ugly?
Well, careful, updraft.
Elisa herself also gets a great deal of development. The issue of how much sleep she's managing to get between her job as a police detective and staying up all night to pal around with the gargoyles comes up on a few occasions, with her even admitting at one point that she often wishes she would just wake up one morning and learn it was all a dream.
You don't know how much I'd like to, and when I woke up it would be over for me. No more monsters, good or bad. Just normal life.
There are also a few episodes during the world tour, as we're introduced a lot more in depth to the various members of her family and different aspects of her cultural background. Besides Goliath, Angela, and Elisa, the other 4 lead characters are somewhat underserved in comparison, being that they're absent during most of the world tour.
So, when do we get our world tour?
Again, I'd liken them to the members of the Enterprise crews. Each one of them is consistently well written and has their own specific part to play, both in terms of their roles on the team within context, as well as their roles within the story on a meta level, and each one of them do get an episode in the spotlight here and there, but ultimately, like the Trek crews, I find that most of their usage from episode to episode is as a team first and individuals second. Brooklyn, I think, gets the most mileage out of Season 2, with him learning to step into more of a leadership role when Goliath makes him second in command. This is especially true the few times we cut back to the other gargoyles during the world tour.
Why are you looking at me?
Because Goliath chose you to lead the clan should something happen to him. And I'd say disappearing without a trace qualifies as something.
It's nice to see how much this character has matured since his spotlight episode in the first season, as well as how much he still has to go if he can ever hope to be a leader of the same caliber as Goliath.
Goliath, be careful, huh? I'm in no hurry to take your place.
Seems neither of us can escape the role of leader.
Yeah. Try as I might.
Recognizing how much more you still have to learn and grow is perhaps the most important part of growing and learning in real life, and this conflict is well presented through Brooklyn.
I'll lead the best I can, but that doesn't mean we give up hope. We'll find them. I swear to it. Jalapeno, you're still alive!
Hudson, meanwhile, is still terrific in the role of the younger gargoyle's wise old mentor, who's still got some fight in him.
Jalapeno.
He even helps Brooklyn to find his confidence as team leader in Goliath's absence. Broadway is usually the most prominently featured in episodes that involve the mob, and still has an intense dislike of guns, which he destroys every time he can get his hands on them while fighting crime.
Jalapeno.
It's a nice bit of continuity with the gun violence episode back back in Season 1. Broadway and Hudson have their own little subplot over the course of a few episodes.
You can't read, can you?
I can't read, and I don't think I'm missing anything.
Both characters start out the season illiterate, but each discovers the importance of reading, demonstrating by the end of the season that they've now learned how to do so. As a former English teacher, this was an important message to include in Gargoyles for series co-creator Greg Wiseman.
We wanted our characters to know how to read, and we wanted to encourage reading in our audience.
It isn't shameful to be illiterate, Hudson. It's only a shame to stay that way.
Lexington, meanwhile, also still has a particularly strong animosity towards the members of the Pack, who were first introduced as television heroes who tricked him into nearly leading his family to be killed or captured.
Look, Lex, I know how you feel. You trusted them and they used you. Nearly got you and Goliath killed. But you can't let it consume you. You need to remember what's really important.
Jalapeno.
Since we're on the topic, let's actually take a look at the Pack. Now, I'll admit, I didn't much care for the Pack in Season 1. Back then, they never really rose above the typical team of bad guys who fights the team of good guys trope. This season, however, does a lot to improve each of them as characters. I was very pleasantly surprised to see the various members of the Pack each given their own episodes to grow and develop individually.
What I want to know is, where do we take them? A hospital? A machine shop? Or a vet?
Fox quits the team entirely to marry Xanatos, while the siblings Hyena and Jackal become cyborgs, teaming up with Xanatos' severed robot head, who now just seems to have adopted the Coyote moniker he was first introduced as.
I'm programmed to shoot first and ask questions later.
Wolf becomes a literal human-wolf mutant hybrid, a la the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Dingo becomes Australian Iron Man.
I hope you're not planning to eat your catch.
Now that I'm in charge, I'm not taking any more of your cracks.
You're not our leader, Wolf. You're barely our species. I still can't believe what you three did to yourselves.
Despite only getting one episode to himself, I think Dingo is my favorite out of the bunch.
I want to clean the slate. Make a fresh start. If that's what it needs, then I'm for it.
He realizes that he actually really loved being loved by people back when the Pack were pretending to be TV heroes, and that he'd like to try his hand at being an actual hero for once, rather than just another criminal like his former compatriots.
I want to be a hero again. For real this time.
Jackal and Hyena, meanwhile, double down on the more villainous side of their characters. While there isn't a whole lot more to them here than there was before, these two are a lot more fun and given more room to breathe and stand out as a duo than they were when shackled with a bunch of other teammates. Jackal at one point even tries to essentially destroy the world by absorbing the Egyptian jackal god of death, Anubis, played by Tony J.
Death is the ultimate fairness. Rich and poor, young and old, all are equal in death.
Wolf, meanwhile, discovers that Hakon, the Viking raider who destroyed Goliath's clan back in the series pilot, is in fact his long-lost ancestor. Which should have been fairly obvious, right? I mean, those two were voiced by Clancy Brown. That's how that works, right?
I got no problem with that. Neither do I.
Following a bit of spectral shenanigans after death, Hakon's spirit now inhabits his old battle axe, teaming up with his descendant Wolf to get mutual revenge on Goliath.
What did you expect? A fair fight?
Get an afterlife.
There are other mutants in the show as well. Elisa's brother Derek, along with a handful of other people, are essentially tricked into becoming mutant approximations of gargoyles created by a mad scientist named Dr. Savarius, played by Tim Curry, who works for Xanatos. Yet another fun recurring villain.
Human protocols. A human test subjects injected with a mutagenic formula. What?
Most of the conflict with these guys stems from their struggling with the fact that they aren't human anymore, and as a result have seemingly lost their place within society. However, these mutants eventually find a new purpose as a sort of B-team who frequently teams up with the Gargoyles, and they even move underground like a certain other mutant hero team I can think of.
Thank you, Goliath. But it seems I have my own clan. And my own family.
They too get a few solid episodes to shine and become more fleshed out as the season progresses, with the team going through a couple of pretty big shakeups by the end. Another great baddie is Coldstone, played again by Mr. Worf himself, Michael Dorn.
Goliath, why do you attack me?
Coldstone is revealed to be a Frankenstein's monster of not one, but 3 of Goliath's former siblings, which explains the drastic personality shifts in his first season introduction. All 3 of these souls, I guess, are trapped inside the body of Coldstone and are constantly embroiled in conflict as the 2 peaceable gargoyles battle for control of their body with their less scrupulous third companion. There's a few really fun episodes with Coldstone that involve a lot of body swapping and second guessing who's in control of what when.
I
I will have your head. I will not fight you, my leader. I will destroy you.
Jalapeno, do I have a headache.
Then, of course, there's the series' primary villain, David Xanatos, played once again by Jonathan the Man Frakes.
Chin up.
Early on in Season 2, Xanatos and Fox get married in what turns out to be an elaborate ruse conducted by Xanatos to send himself 1,000 years into the past so that he can arrange for the Illuminati to deliver him a few ancient coins. These coins aren't particularly valuable in medieval Scotland, but by the 20th century they'll be worth enough for a young Xanatos to begin building his vast fortune.
I received instructions from myself last week. That's how I knew how to set this all up. So you see, Pop, I am indeed a self-made man.
What have you done? You created a time paradox.
All right, Mr. Big Shot Time Traveler. You sent off your little letter before answering one important question.
Who's President of the United States in 1985?
Xanatos is also revealed to be somewhat sociopathic, at least at first. I mean, just listen to his proposal to Fox.
Marry me.
Are you serious?
We're genetically compatible, highly intelligent, and have the same goals. It makes perfect sense to get married.
But what about love?
I think we love each other as much as two people such as ourselves are capable of that emotion.
He seems to hold those close to him with little regard. In that same episode, he gives Fox a powerful magical artifact for their engagement that turns her into a sort of werewolf, basically all as just a big experiment. And this is only one of the many heinous acts that he commits.
Kidnapping, extortion, betrayal. Where would you like me to start?
Later on, Xanatos is revealed to have created a clone of Goliath named Thalog in secret and raised him to be every bit as cutthroat as he is, even thinking of Thalog as a son of sorts.
The kid turned out to be a real chip off the old block.
Indeed he did.
However, Xanatos also doesn't seem to care much at all when he thinks that Thalog has been killed. Thalog himself isn't super interesting. His main goal is basically just to get rich at any cost.
I've got plans of my own. And $20 million to see them through.
But it is pretty fun on occasion to hear Keith David play an evil version of Goliath. Despite all of the very reprehensible shit he's constantly up to, Xanatos still never feels like your stereotypical mustache-twirling baddie.
Xanatos isn't the reincarnation of Snidely Whiplash.
No, everything he does is eventually revealed to be a calculated part of one of his many schemes. He doesn't even seem to have any animosity towards the Gargoyles, despite their constant thwarting of his plans, often teaming up with or helping them whenever he thinks it's necessary to do so for what he's up to this week.
Fox and I are getting married tomorrow night. I want you to be the best man.
You cannot be serious.
Although the show does have a lot of fun dancing around the evil villain trope with Xanatos as well. There's an episode where he has to play the role of a typical mustache-twirling baddie as subterfuge to get what he really wants.
It's my first real stab at cliched villainy. How am I doing?
However, Xanatos ultimately softens quite a lot towards the end of the season following the birth of his son Alexander. You can see that he's actually quite protective of the safety of his wife and child when a couple of gods come calling to steal the infant away from his parents. And I don't want to get into the why of any of it since I'd have to ruin two pretty awesome plot twists to do so, but trust me, it's really cool on the show. Anyway, the point is that Xanatos' heart grows 3 sizes that day, and he seems to learn that maybe, just maybe, loving and caring for others isn't such a weakness after all.
We changed the life of our lead villain, Xanatos, pretty much forever as he discovers true love.
So now you know my weakness.
Only you would regard love as a weakness.
I believe he's right. You've never looked more heroic.
A momentary lapse, I assure you.
As thanks to the Gargoyles for their help with his son, Xanatos lets them move back into Castle Wyvern and pretty much agrees to stop being a bad guy, which is a really interesting way to leave off his character at the end of this season.
What's the catch, Xanatos?
No catches, no tricks, no strings. The feud is over, Detective.
I do also quite like Fox.
Mission complete!
She's sly and mysterious in a similar manner to her husband, while still feeling like a distinct character in her own right. Xanatos is also 100% correct when he says the two are perfect for each other. There's an episode where Fox attempts to use corporate espionage to seize control of her own father's multi-billion-dollar company, pretty much just for shits and giggles.
Almost got you that time, didn't I?
Yes, but why?
I built this company for you. I'd have given it to you already if you hadn't married that villain Xanatos.
Now we come to my favorite pair of baddies, as well as my favorite subplot in Gargoyles. More than any other character on the show, Goliath's former mate turned enemy, Demona, completely embodies the series' condemnation of vengeance seeking. We learn in Season 2 that about 20 years after Goliath and his clan were betrayed and put under their sleeping spell, Demona becomes embroiled in the life and tragedies of Macbeth, the titular Scottish king from the Shakespearean play, with the show even recreating a couple of iconic scenes.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Gargoyles plays pretty fast and loose with the story of the play itself, recasting Macbeth as more of a tragic avenger than a man who becomes corrupted by the darkness of his own ambitions.
Turn, murderer! Your time has come, but I will strike you down like the cowardly dog you are.
The story is still a tragedy, though. It's just a different type of tragedy. Funnily enough, the story of Gargoyles Macbeth is accented by little details from the life of the historical King Macbeth, like the names of his wife, father, and son, as well as the castle he grew up in, details which I'm pretty sure aren't ever mentioned in Shakespeare's play. In this version of the tale, Macbeth's father is murdered in front of him as a teenager by a man called the Hunter. Macbeth teams up with Demona, who also wants revenge against the Hunter because of his obsessive killing of gargoyles. A spell is put on these two by the Weird Sisters, where Macbeth gives up his youthful appearance so that Demona can regain the strength of her youth. She's eternally young, while he's eternally old. Neither one of them can ever die from age or sickness, even in combat. Only if one of them was ever to fatally wound the other would both of them be able to die. Additionally, the two of them share each other's pain if they're close enough to each other, which, by the way, makes future fights between them particularly funny to watch. Following their union, these two and their clans live and work together successfully for decades.
Let this mark the beginning of a golden age between all our clans, both human and gargoyle.
Until Demona overhears a conversation where Macbeth's human allies are encouraging him to betray the gargoyles as a political move. Rather than try to confront her old friend over what she's heard, Demona instead falls back on her mistrust of humans and goes for the nuclear option. She preemptively betrays Macbeth to his enemies, leading to his exile from Scotland and, as we find out later, the eventual death of his son.
Demona, first desertion and now betrayal. Why? We have been allies for 37 years, and now because of you, my kingdom is in flames.
I merely offer you a sample of what you planned from me. I know you would have betrayed me and my kind to win the approval of the English.
Never would I have done so!
However, surprise surprise, Demona is also betrayed by the people she betrayed Macbeth to, and once again her entire clan is slaughtered. This series of events ignites a fierce mutual hatred between Macbeth and Demona that lasts the next 1,000 years.
You blame me, I blame you. Aren't you tired of talking about it?
While he may be almost nothing like either his literary or historical counterparts in any but the most basic of ways, Gargoyles Macbeth is, like Demona, a great deal more compelling here in Season 2 than he was in the first season, where he was sort of just a bad guy. Instead, we learn that he's really more of an anti-hero than a straight-up villain. His origin story reveals him to be a family man at heart until he too becomes wrapped up in a perpetual cycle of revenge, though not nearly as badly as Demona.
Your father was an evil man who deserved his fate, but you were just a boy then. So I offer one last opportunity for forgiveness and mercy.
The ones responsible for that have been dead for 1,000 years.
Then their descendants shall pay. I will have blood for blood.
Meanwhile, most everything bad he does in the present day is revealed to be in pursuit of his goal to end his own suffering by killing Demona, who, let's face it, is completely the out of control by this point in her life and really needs to have her constant murdering and attempted genocide put a stop to some way or another.
Killing me will gain you nothing but your own death.
After this long a lifetime, I have no fear of that, and no desire to live in the kind of world you're creating.
Like Xanatos, Macbeth doesn't truly hate or even really hold a grudge against any of the other gargoyles, besides Demona, of course, and you even get a few moments where the better man he was in his youth shines through.
You understand I don't get any real pleasure out of this.
His final appearance in the series concludes with him becoming BFFs with King Arthur, which is pretty rad.
I have been a king too long to serve any man. But if you ever need me to stand by your side, I will come.
Okay, so circling back to Demona. At nearly every fork in the road, Demona continually makes the wrong decision, making things worse and worse for her as she goes. Despite this, she never has it in her to accept responsibility for her actions, choosing instead to double down on her prejudice of humans every time.
What have I they done to you?
You see, this instance with Macbeth is far from the first time Demona's hatred has gotten her into trouble. It's revealed that she was also partly responsible for the death of her original clan with Goliath by being in on the captain of the guard's conspiracy to take over Castle Wyvern.
This ruins everything. The plan was to have all the gargoyles away during the attack.
She made this decision due to her mistrust of the humans who lived there, a mistrust that was planted in her to begin with, in large part thanks to herself from the present having come back in time to try and change the past, like Biff from Back to the Future 2.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you very much. Now, why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
It's leave, you idiot. Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong.
All right, then leave!
Is anyone else getting deja vu? The bad decisions don't stop there, though. This random act of violence she inflicts on a poor stable boy who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time while she's fleeing Castle Wyvern sets him on his own path of vengeance to eventually become the Hunter, the masked assassin who would plague she and Macbeth years later.
Look closely, creature. 'Tis your handiwork, done when I was but a boy. She shall pay for what she did. She and all her evil race.
The Hunter's eventual death also kickstarts a generations-long dynasty of gargoyle hunters who follow in the footsteps of their ancestor, the original Hunter, seeking revenge against Demona and all other gargoyles even up through the present day.
1,000 we exterminate them.
Speaking of present day, you would hope that after 1,000 years of this Demona would just learn to get off the hate train already. But no, at one point she attempts to use the trickster Puck to destroy all of humanity.
All of them.
Does this look like Aladdin's lamp? I have limits after all.
What? What are you trying to say? Out with it! What?
Which, after a series of hilarious mishaps, blows up in her face, leaving her cursed to transform into a human every day at dawn rather than turn into stone. This may seem like a net gain for Demona since, well, it is, she's no longer vulnerable during the day, but she, of course, still considers it a curse that she's been forced to live out over half of the rest of eternity in a form she despises.
Kinky.
At one point, while heavily sedated, she does almost recognize that a lot of the blame for her grief is her own damn fault, but ultimately falls back to her favorite scapegoat.
You tricked me! You had me under a spell! None of this was my fault! It was the humans! Always the humans!
Demona is, in my opinion, the most compelling character in the series. She may not have the suave sophistication of Xanatos or the sheer badassery of Macbeth, but Demona's absolute single-minded pursuit of vengeance is one of the classic elements of a tragic character, and her voice actor, Marina Sirtis, who was on Star Trek, absolutely nails it. This character is so blinded by hatred that even when the greatest miracle she could have ever hoped for drops into her lap when Goliath and the others awaken in the pilot episode, even then, she doesn't even try to just put it all aside and go live with them in peace, vowing instead to kill Goliath when he condemns her needlessly violent actions.
Don't you see? None of this would have happened if it weren't for you.
Don't say that!
I'll admit, Demona's attitude seemed a tad forced to me at the time, back in Season 1, but if you go back and watch it all again with her Season 2 development in mind, it's all perfectly consistent and pretty sad, honestly.
Sad, but true.
That's not to say the character is all doom and gloom, though. Towards the end of Season 2, there are hints at redemption for Demona through a relationship with her daughter Angela.
Goliath! Save our daughter!
It's also extremely funny how transparently not over Goliath Demona is.
How quaint. After all these centuries, you're still carrying a torch.
Despite tacitly admitting in Season 1 that Elisa Maza is probably one of the good ones,
perhaps the policewoman is the exception that proves the rule.
Demona begins to irrationally despise Elisa in this season, right around the same time the show starts hinting at a romantic attraction between her and Goliath.
Well, this is diverting. You don't know the half of it.
What do you mean I'm not over Goliath? I'm totally over Goliath. Who needs that jerk? Not me, because I'm so over him. I hate his new girlfriend, though. Filthy human. She isn't good enough for him. Not that I care. By the way, did I mention I'm dating his clone?
You mean the two of you?
It was love at first flight.
Macbeth may be a fairly obvious choice if you're looking to incorporate some aspect of Shakespeare into your medieval Scotland-centric fantasy story, but A Midsummer Night's Dream is less so, and I really have to give the writers props for choosing it, since this is my favorite of Shakespeare's many plays, at least from what I can remember reading back in high school.
One of our hopes was that kids would watch the show and go, I want to know more about Midsummer Night's Dream. I'm going to go get that play and read it. And in fact, the fans have told me that happened. It's one of the things I'm proudest of.
While none of the events from A Midsummer Night's Dream are directly recreated, several of its characters, namely Oberon, the king of the fairies, his estranged wife Titania, and his wayward servant Puck, are translated here onto the silver screen fairly accurately to how they're portrayed in the play. I particularly enjoy Gargoyles' version of Puck, played by Brent Spiner of Star Trek TNG fame, and some really great casting.
Thy sight, Demona, doth offend, so Puck will hasten to amend. Begone, Elisa, human-born, and be no more as you were formed.
Puck's introductory episode, where he's granting Demona monkey's paw-type wishes by magically swapping everybody's species, is a lot of fun. Screwing around with people like that is something he does on the regular in the original play as well, so it's true to character.
Did you say that human or that human? Oh, never mind, I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I'll do exactly as you ask.
I think it would have been hilarious to also do an episode where Puck switches around who all the various characters are romantically attracted to, another thing he does in the play.
I can make him love you again. Piece of cake.
But alas, that never happens. These borrowed characters from A Midsummer Night's Dream serve as the backbone to most of the mystical aspects of Gargoyles' lore. You see, in this world, basically every mythical being you've ever heard of in any ancient legend, superstition, bedtime story, etc. are all real and all referred to as the Children of Oberon, a blanket term on the show for any supernatural being. Everyone from the Wailing Banshee to Anansi the Spider to Odin Allfather and even the three witches from Macbeth. Every one of them are Oberon's children.
I thought everybody knew this.
Yeah, that guy Shakespeare wrote a play about them. A Midsummer Night's Dream?
Towards the end of the season, Oberon calls all of his kids home to Avalon, and you get some really surreal and hilarious imagery of all of the supernatural characters we've met along the way just lined up to see him like they're waiting for a carnival ride or something. Like in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Oberon is having marital issues with his wife Titania, played here by Kate Mulgrew of Star Trek Voyager.
I have done as you bid, Michael. I have lived among them, and I have come to know them well. But perhaps you have not learned your own lesson.
Do you now profess concern for mortals, Titania?
Their problems are revealed to be the driving force behind most of the series' big magical shakeups behind the scenes, and Goliath's quest to right a series of seemingly unrelated wrongs throughout the world tour becomes karmically important to resolving the big climax of the story.
Avalon does not take you where you want to go. Avalon sends you where you need to be.
We are minded to be generous. You have an hour to remove yourselves from our domain.
This is our home. We have no place else to go.
That is none of our concern.
Oberon and Titania themselves are perhaps a little more callous and even somewhat villainous than they are in the play, but it fits the way they've been built up throughout the season as beings who are simply too far above anyone else to care at all what these puny mortals think of their actions. All of it is suitably comic booky.
I am through playing games, mortal.
Gargoyles Season 2 really is a pretty great bit of television. Due to the season's extreme length, there are tons of other great characters, settings, and situations to go over, many of whom only appear in a single episode. If you're looking for a few recommendations on episodes that I feel stood out in particular, I'd say these here were probably my favorites out of the 52. While the first season of Gargoyles showed great potential, Season 2 had now lived up to that potential in spades, garnering near universal critical acclaim and widespread popularity.
I know what you mean. I used to think gargoyles were just glorified rain spouts.
Don't gush all over us, okay? It's kind of embarrassing.
There were even a few spin-offs of Gargoyles planned around some of the guest characters we meet throughout Season 2, which would have been the first step towards transforming this one show into a multi-series cartoon universe in the same vein as DC and Marvel.
Yes, the time may soon come when the world will have to face the new Olympians.
None of those plans ever ended up going through, unfortunately, but that's something we'll get into more of when I cover Season 3. Just about the only real criticism I can offer Gargoyles' second season, besides some uneven pacing, is that the animation quality varies wildly from episode to episode. This was because, yet again, due to the series' longer length, these episodes had to be divvied up between a number of different animation studios. There are, however, a handful of episodes where the animation really stands out, blowing away everything else in the series, past or future. That future must have looked pretty bright at the time, too. Surely, following the success of this second outing, a third season of Gargoyles could only get better from here, right? Wrong! When we next visit the world of Gargoyles in Season 3, we will also, unfortunately, see the return of an old foe. A foe that anyone who's watched my reboot retrospective ought to be familiar with.
It's the ABCs! They've turned on us! Treacherous dogs!
That's right, it's the return of the ABC Network. Jalapeno. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on all of my future stuff. Let me know down in the comments any of your thoughts on Gargoyles' second season, and any other TV shows and topics you'd like to see covered in the future. As always, thanks so much to all of you guys for watching, and take care.
It is over.